Professor Tribe, I was hanging on every word that the president said about the 14th Amendment and you. What is your response to what you just heard the president say?
Well, I'm glad the president is considering the constitutional reason that I think he has really a duty to spend the money that Congress has directed him to spend, even if that means going beyond the debt ceiling. I think the president is worried about litigation, but he doesn't need to be, because this is not a situation in which either Kevin McCarthy or the House of Representatives or anybody else is in a position to file a lawsuit against the president or against the federal government for doing what Congress has told them to do. What kind of lawsuit would it be? Just imagine, suppose you could find someone who is injured when the president spends the money that Congress has told him to spend. What would that person ask the court to do? You have to ask the court to say to the president of the United States, violate the spending laws, Mr. President. Violate the spending laws. And by the way, we can't tell you which programs to cut. I guess you've got to stop spending altogether. But that would put the country in default anyway, because we would end up with IOUs to all the people who were being stiffed by the President of the United States. So it wouldn't achieve the purpose of any such lawsuit. It would be asking a court to order the president to violate Section 4 of the 14th Amendment, which says that we must pay our debts. So I think the president really needn't worry about any lawsuit that would stop him from obeying the spending laws. And I'm not suggesting, as some people have, that he go to court. He doesn't need the court's permission to follow these laws. And this is not at all like the lawsuit that was brought on Monday by 75,000 federal workers who said that they want the debt ceiling to be held unconstitutional because it threatens their jobs. That's a different kind of lawsuit. It's a lawsuit by someone who says, I think that unless you follow your constitutional obligations, and if you allow the Kevin McCarthy's of the world to hold you hostage, we're going to lose our jobs. So in that lawsuit, they want the court to give them some understandable relief. But the president doesn't have to go to court, and there's nobody who has a gripe against him who could take him to court, except maybe Kevin McCarthy, who would say, you know, this takes away from me the ability I have to hold you hostage. He doesn't have standing to go to court for that purpose. It's not at all like the case where in 2015, the House of Representatives was allowed by the district court in the case of U.S. House of Representatives against Burwell to take the Secretary of Health and Human Services to court for spending money that was never appropriated by Congress. Well, that's different. When you cut the House of Representatives out of the process and spend money they haven't appropriated, they have the ability to sue. But in this case, the money has been appropriated. That's the whole point. The debt limit doesn't limit the debt. It just gets in the way of the president carrying out the law. So, Mr. President, if you're listening, or if your White House counsel is listening, don't worry about being sued in this case. You've got an airtight reason, and it's written right there in the Constitution of the United States, which I know you believe in and which you've studied. I don't think there's any reason for you to be held hostage, and there's every reason for you to do your duty under the 14th Amendment.
You know, when I kind of fast forward to the notion of some kind of lawsuit, some way in which this issue presents itself to a federal court, and let's assume ultimately the Supreme Court, it is inconceivable to me that the Supreme Court could find a way to look at the budget of the United States and do what? Order a stay of spending by the administration. What would they stay? Would they stay all payments by the federal government, or would the Supreme Court sit there and decide which pieces of these obligations should we, the Supreme Court, decide the government will pay while we, the Supreme Court, deliberate over the larger question. It just seems procedurally impossible.
Impossible. They would be wearing a green eye shade over their black robes, and they would be sort of performing the role of the Office of Management and Budget.
Yes.
Line item veto by the judicial branch. It's insane. It's just not going to happen. It can't happen.